Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Today we will be talking about the recent and unfolding situation in Britain. We know that Britain is facing one of the most challenging times in its recent history. For over 2 weeks, there have been violent protests of course, throughout different cities of the Britain. And of course, this started earlier on July 29 with, of course, murder of 3 innocent young girls. And of course, misinformation spread quickly because of the social media, and of course Muslims have been attacked in different violent attacks throughout different cities of the Britain. In today's program we will be talking about this unfolding situation in Britain, and of course how the new government is going to be dealing with it. But underlying question remains that how significant it is to tackle the issue of course hatred, Islamophobia and anti-immigrant sentiments within Britain of today, and how important it is to of course retain the values of multiculturalism in Britain. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Sheharyar, who is analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Dr. Hamid AlMashriqi, who is senior analyst and strategic affairs expert. Welcome to the program. Dr. Hamid, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about this recent unfolding situation in Britain over the past 2 weeks, and now we are witnessing that, of course, protests are going on, violent attacks on asylum seekers, and Muslims have been significant. How do you see the key factors behind all these violent attacks throughout different cities?
Yes, thank you very much, Maryam. I would like to say that it is really not all of a sudden it is happening. It has been, building in far right for some long time now. That they were, finding it hard the progress and the, progress and development of the Asians and particularly Muslims in Britain. And they find it hard to digest it. That is the very sad fact. They take so many things for granted, while the immigrant or Pakistanis or Muslims, they work very hard here to meet their goals and to achieve, and they have achieved a lot as well. I'll just tell you that about a few months ago, I was personally interviewing Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, and I asked him the same two questions: the increase of hate crimes and the racial, discrimination in Britain. And he acknowledged the problem even about 16, 17 months ago, that yes, there is a problem of hate crime and racial discrimination and Islamophobia. And he said that he will try to bring proper policy against it. And we have to see, since Labour have come in power, they have, abolished the Rwanda plan, where Tory government planned to send, asylum seekers to Rwanda. And then it's a general perception that the Labour is always a little bit lenient towards immigration. So this far right has planned. It is not; these are not protests. I believe these are the planned, mobs who are doing their lootings, who are showing their anger against, immigrants, especially particularly Muslims. And their aim is not to bring anything positive in the society. Rather, but they are bringing, they have polarized the society more. They are not in large numbers. They are in very small numbers. But
Right.
their
But
effect
Dr. Hamid, how do you compare it to, of course, previous riots that we witnessed in 2011? And then when we go a little back in history, in 1970s, there was, of course, an era of anti-Paki sentiment in Britain, where South Asians were marginalized. And like you said, there have been a progress over these past 3-4 decades. But how do you compare this situation to the past?
This time, I would say it is a bit different. In the past, the extreme right wing was only, demanding, that there should be some rules and regulations on immigration. But this time, they are talking about extreme steps against immigrants. Is this time they've been violent against, this time they've been throwing acids on the women. This time they are snatching the hijab of the girls. This time they are looting going and targeting the mosque and the shops of the Muslims. This time they are targeting taxi drivers of the Muslims. So this time they are more violent, and I would say that they have been encouraged by some politicians as well. I don't want to name them, but they have indirectly encouraged those extreme right-wing people. And even we have seen Alan Musk, the way he has encouraged, and there is a great reaction from ex-First Minister of Scotland, Hamza Yusuf. He has given a great reaction that, Alan Musk, what he is doing is like a most dangerous man on this planet. Because if anybody will increase and anybody will say that a civil war is inevitable in Britain, it is all too far-fetched things. And if they will try to add the fuel in the fire, it's not going to help. And I believe that the society of Britain is very, harmonious, and we have been living together for many years. We don't have any problem, and most of the British people, they accept it, and they like to live in harmony. And we have such an extremely good relations with local British people.
Right,
So
and
it
of
is
course,
only a minority.
right, Dr. Hamid, let me bring Sheharyar to discussion as well. Sheharyar, how significant do you think that misinformation was a factor in all this? Because when we, of course, when the news spread about this attacker in Southport that killed, unfortunately, 3 young girls, and others were also injured in the attack. So initially, as per UK laws, of course, under 18, his identity was not to be disclosed. So misinformation spread around it that he was an asylum seeker. So how significant do you think that this misinformation was a factor, and how the UK government dealt with it? What's your take on that?
So Maryam, like the misinformation, or I would say fake news that was emanating from the social media did kind of like fuel this whole like riot against the minorities. But we have to keep in mind that incidents like these do not like just happen. So there is a 15-year-old rule of conservatives that has just ended, and a whole of their rule in the last like 10 to 15 years was based around Islamophobia. So this was not something that like was instigated or something that erupted on that day because of the fake news on social media. It did play a role, but that was not the primary role. It was a role of an instigator.
Do you think this was continuation of course, Islamophobia and anti-immigration sentiment within various part of various cities of?
Now there are like all sorts of like factors that we have to study on how they all congregated and this like whole incident happened. We have to like see the whole political economy and the geopolitical situation that is arising. I would say we also have to like now analyze how the Brexit happened. And at that time as well, Brexit was also a xenophobic movement in which the right wing or the conservative British people, they basically voted to get out of Brexit because they basically feared that people from the European Union or like countries like Romania and from Eastern Europe, they're coming and they're taking their jobs. And at that time, if you remember, all the British citizens, mostly conservative in nature, they voted for Brexit. Now, the economic situation after Brexit did not improve, and the promises that were made by politicians at that time that were pro-Brexit, they couldn't deliver those promises. The promises were economic prosperity. As soon as these immigrants or job seekers leave, we will have like more jobs, economically we'll be prospering, and we will be able to control immigration. Now, if you see, ever since Russia has like launched the war on Ukraine, there has been a huge influx of Ukrainian asylum seekers that have come. And initially, if you remember, they were very welcomed in Europe, they were very welcomed in Britain. And there is a phenomena which is basically called refugee fatigue. And that happens in every country, every region, that if the war is prolonged and the refugees keep on coming, people get sick and tired of them. And then they have to like pay from their taxpayers' money and to adjust them, to basically give them jobs. And the whole phenomena of the outsider coming and taking their jobs, that has like taken root as well. And because of now the Europe is not taking gas from Russia, the price of commodities has increased many folds. The price of food, the price of energy, the inflation in all
and
aspects.
asylum seekers were provided housing in hotels.
Free housing as well. So all of this has basically put a lot of economic burden on these people, and whenever there is like economic burden, whenever there is social unrest, the far right becomes stronger. And this is also the English Defence League, which is right-wing, racist,
But it's banned.
anti-immigrant.
It's defect for
Yeah, but
last
like
decade.
it is defunct because it's not allowed to contest in the elections. But on the grounds, they have a grassroots presence and they do mobilize people. And most of these people are between the age of like 40 to 50 and more. And these are the people who are not digitally aware. So these are not people who can like understand fake news. They're not, aware of how social media works, how the news
but
cycle
I want
works.
to take your point about xenophobia, and Dr. Hamid, what's your take on this? About, of course, we have been hearing the slogans of "Stop the Boats." How these slogans have contributed to the rise of xenophobia in Britain, and what do you see are the ultimate consequences on social cohesion within Britain?
Definitely, there are grave consequences of such slogans. But at the same time, I mean, we have seen that the Tory government was very strict on immigration, but they were failed to put or implement the right laws. I mean, it is the failure of the previous government as well in many matters in terms of immigration. I mean, on the other hand, we have seen that current situation, it's already the British government is saying that they're gonna make more clarified rules in terms of immigration. On the other hand, let me tell you a very clear fact which is hard to digest for the right wing. That is that according to a research, an immigrant, I mean, he's settled here, living here as a citizen of the country, is contributing 7 to 10 times more in GDP of Britain than a person who's taking benefits, and he's a local person who's taking benefits or living on state resources. So I mean, these are the facts. When they see the people are flourishing, people are making living in nice houses and having enjoying the better lifestyle. I mean, it is hard for digest, but at the same time, I believe that there is a need of awareness for them and from the government as well, and from the local, Pakistani Muslims and other Muslim community, that need to make them aware that this is not that they are getting the resources of the country, rather they are contributing towards the progress of the Britain. I mean, there is a very clear fact that if there won't be immigrants or there won't be Muslim community here, the British economy could collapse. That is the fact which needs to be make them aware as well. It is not about taking their jobs. It's about taking and sharing the responsibility and the burden of the economy. That is the difference which we need to explain, and which local politicians needs to explain. It is not about xenophobia. It is not about Islamophobia. It is about the contribution of the Muslim. And on the other hand, it is very clearly we have seen that there is still discrimination when it comes to the government jobs with Muslims. There is still discrimination when it comes to sports such as football and others. We have seen a lot of discrimination, but at the same time, I believe that the way Muslims have contributed in it, it has to be appreciated. It's not now. It is since World War One, then since World War Two. Then we have seen in 60s the after the the all that revival of their economy and all the industrial revival. So we have seen the contribution of the Muslims and the immigrants. So it is the time when there is a need of a proper campaign to make them realize that if they are not taking your resources, rather they are helping improvement of your economy, and your economy is based on the great efforts of immigrants and Muslims.
Dr. Hamid, you are saying that it is important to make them realize, but in your opinion, how has the, of course, public perception, Britain public's perception of immigrants have changed in the recent past? And what are the factors that have driven this change?
I don't say that the majority's perception have changed, first of all. I still believe that the majority thinks that the people who are against immigration, they are not well aware of the contribution of the immigrants. Yes, it does. It does affect when it is immigration fatigue, or when it is a fatigue from the people who come from refugees camps or others. But it is not that the majority of the British people, they live in very harmonious. Yes, there is a very strong campaign going on against them. And I believe that it is a time when government needs to take steps where they have to take a legal action against anybody who's taking the law in their hands. Once this is taken, this is been done, then I think there will be fair discussion about the role of the immigrants, and about when they claim that they have taken their jobs, they need to justify that how they deserve those jobs. As you have seen one of the videos when they asked from one of the protester that what is 4 divided by 2, and he couldn't even tell that, and then they expect that they will get the jobs of higher level, or doctors, or accountants, or managers. It has to be fair. I mean, if somebody has come here and worked hard, got degree, and then they got a very difficult job, and they're playing their role in the economy, I think this is needs to be more explained than anything else, and government has to put and enforce better laws.
Right, and coming to the government, of course, we remember, Stemmer was one of the vocal advocates at the time in 2011 riots. And how do you see British government's, which is of course new, response to these riots, when he is saying statements like swift criminal sanctions against far-right rioters will be taken?
So, Maryam, when it comes to applying the force of the law, the UK Prime Minister has also basically said that they are expanding the whole network of the prison system by 600 to 1,000 more seats, and they will be swiftly taking action against the rioters. There will be special courts that will take decisions in like less than a month, and the justice will be quick and speedy. But moving beyond that, I personally think that the whole idea of the national identity, of what it means to be British, that is like something that these writers or the right-wing, EDL supporters or anti-immigrants or Islamophobic, writers, they have like questioned that. And they are basically saying that the whole idea of Britain or what it means to be British was based upon the whole idea of multiculturalism, and Britain is like one society which is like multicultural, it's like multiracial, it's like multi-religious, it's also multi-ethnic. So all of these like people of like various different backgrounds, they're like there in that like geographical location, and they're working towards this whole like idea of what it means to be British. So these people are questioning that, and they want to replace that with a very narrow-minded, very xenophobic idea that Britain or being British basically is equated by being English, which basically constitutes the white original inhabitants of England. We also have to like keep in mind that if you look at the whole of the UK, this whole like writing situation only happened in England. It did not happen in Ireland, Northern Ireland. It did not happen in Wales. It did not happen in Scotland. So why is like this whole island coming up with these ideas? And this can be very linked to this right-wing nationalism that is like erupting. And at the forefront are these like white British people who are not very educated, I would say. They are bearing the brunt of the economic situation.
So do you think that historical grievances from these far-right extremists is playing an important role in continuation of these riots?
Exactly. Like previously their sentiments were exploited by Nigel Farage, who basically led the movement for Brexit. And now if we look back, that whole movement in which the UK moved out of the European Union was very short-sighted if we look at it. The whole idea or whole benefits that were supposed to be attained by going through Brexit, that they didn't like come through. We also have to realize that, as our other esteemed guest also basically pointed towards, that a lot of like immigrants are also like supporting various different industries in the UK. They support the NHS, they support businesses, a lot of investments come into the UK because of the immigrants, and a lot of like manpower and human resource that otherwise is scarce now in the UK because of the whole Brexit situation, because a lot of like European nationals, they left after Brexit. So were these like writers or like the people who have historical grievances, were they able to fill those jobs? Were they able to exploit the gap in the labor market? They could not. So this whole like idea or this like whole Islamophobia is also can be connected to xenophobia. It can also be connected to anyone who's a foreigner you know. So we can like see that the problem is very different. The problem has been exploited by the politicians for the last 15 years. This is not like something that started like 1 month ago.
Right. And let me take this question to Dr. Hamid. Dr. Hamid, what's your take on this? That how important was the role of political figures belonging to the far right in this situation that, of course, led to one of the most dangerous situation in Britain today? And also, how do you see its consequences on minorities, particularly Muslims within UK?
Yes, definitely. There is it's important role played by the politician, and especially we have seen that in recent elections there was a large number of votes to the right-wing parties as well. I mean, where they support the ideology of, I could say, that white supremacy or something, and we have seen that there was a large number of votes towards the Nigel Farage's party as well, and I think. Now this is the time when I believe that it is again responsibility of the politicians to rather give more awareness of how equal society works, how the society will emerge if there will be clashes between them. What will be the loss of the Britain in such situations? It is a time when Britain is very politically matured society. British people are very much understanding with the situation, or with the I would say that the political changes going on in the Europe, and especially in Britain as well. We have seen this kind of same movement a few years back in France as well, where the right wing was getting very strengthened and strengthened. And just last month, recent election, they lost their popularity, because keep in mind that the extremist right wing popularity is like a bubble. They don't last long. All you need is a proper awareness and resistance against these violent ideologies, whether it is for any nation, any race, or any religion. We have seen it is a history of hundreds of years. I mean, where colonialism failed, and there was a failure of such ideas where they marginalize the minorities, because it is very important for any country to remain peaceful and to do the progress, that there should be an equal right for all the race, religions, and the communities. I think Britain will come out of it. All it needs to be done is, we have seen very positive role, which has been admired by the British government as well, from the Muslim clerics and imams and the people from the mosques and other religious factors. So I think. And we have seen a very positive role of police as well here, where they supported and protected Muslim properties as well. So I think it is a time when the government has to take some tangible actions to give a kind of a shut-up call for the people who instigate that, who try to make the situation worse. Because there is no doubt that the political influence is very plays very significant role in such riots, in such protests. So it has to be controlled, and it has to be more monitored by the government as well.
It has to be controlled for social cohesion within the country as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Hamid AlMashriqi, for joining us in today's program. And Sheharyar, when we talk about, of course, this recent situation, it has its roots in the past as well. In your opinion, what kind of actions are needed by the government, which is new at this point in time, to promote multiculturalism within Britain?
So, Maryam, there needs to be a whole effort when it comes to re-education of a lot of like population in the UK. That's what I'm like feeling, because this like whole movement, which is based around xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-immigrants, or against anyone who's actually a foreigner, according to the worldview of these writers or the conservatives in the UK. So what there needs to be is a new campaign which basically tells the British public on when the immigrants basically come to the UK, how are they contributing to the economy, what it means to basically contribute to public sector, private sector, the business economy of the UK, and how they basically contribute to the economy, as well as they contribute to generating jobs in the
Right,
economy.
of course, that remains an important factor. But at the same time, when we look at the recent decision of cancellation of Rwanda deportation plan, how do you see this is being viewed by the public? What's public sentiment on it, especially the far right?
So,
And what are going to be its consequences for those people?
That is a much larger and a broader debate that needs to come into the foray as well. Now, whenever we talk about the immigration problem in the European Union and the immigration problem in the UK, it has to be viewed in a broader context, and that context has to be geopolitical in nature as well. What we have to like first realize is that like this whole immigration process that is taking place, where are these like immigrants actually coming from? A lot of them are Afghans, you know, and which
from
countries?
Africa
as
and Middle East
well,
as
but like we
well.
have to like see where the bulk of the pressure is coming from, right? So what we have to like see is that which were the countries led under the whole umbrella of NATO that were present in other countries, you know, legally or illegally, or creating war or unrest, and that's where the immigrants are coming from. So will there be a shift in the global policy when it comes to invading other countries? A lot of these countries, as you mentioned, are from Northern Africa. Who was invading Libya? Who deposed Muammar Gaddafi? What was that operation? Who was leading that operation?
So back to the addressing the root cause.
So all of these factors, I would say, are interconnected. If you do not like go and intervene in other countries, then you will not get immigrants.
Right, but at the same time, Sheharyar, how do you see that international community is viewing all this anti-immigrant sentiment in UK, keeping in mind the Brexit and Islamophobia that is spreading
So
each
this
day?
whole anti-immigrant movement, this is not just like isolated towards the UK. We are also seeing this like broad, in a broader context in the European Union as well. So this is also linked to the overall global economic situation as well, which is not really good for a lot of countries, including the European Union. A lot of their funds or a lot of their national resources are getting going to support Ukraine against Russia. You know, and there is a sentiment arising in opposition to that as well. A lot of like people, or I would say the public of the UK, the public of the European Union, they are against their countries fighting wars overseas, and they want their politicians and their policy makers to invest all of those funds in the betterment of the people. So this is like having an impact on their local economies. This is also having an impact on the global aid agenda as well. And you see like a lot of funding for various UN organization is going down. A lot of funding for bilateral support to a lot of countries, including Pakistan, is like going down as well. So this is not just, and then obviously there will be more immigration. If people will not have jobs, if people will not have job security, the economic situation will be precarious, the security situation will be precarious. All of these people, where do you think they will like migrate?
Right, but at the same time, do you think that these right-wing political groups and leaders have been using immigrants and asylum seekers as a scapegoat for, of course, the worsening economic condition of the country after Brexit?
Exactly. So all of the politicians have basically used this sentiment that has been developed, other than pacifying this sentiment, other than making policies that mitigate migration from developing countries or least developing countries. They have been using this rhetoric to gain votes, you know, rather than having policy that actually supports or like stops immigration in one way or the other. Now what we are observing, the phenomena of this immigration that is like happening from I would say Northern Africa, the immigration that is like coming from Afghanistan, immigration that is coming, economic migrants that are like moving from developing countries to developed countries. This is linked to the overall economic situation globally, and this economic situation has been down since the COVID times, and it's like worsening. There is like no sign of the economic situation getting better, and now these like global wars that have sucked in various countries. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine, if you look at what's happening in Palestine, all of those negative sentiments coupled with the economic situation, do you think like the public basically sees that if they don't have enough funds or money to basically go through the whole month, and they see their politicians and their countries investing or like sending their hard-earned tax money to fund wars across the globe, do you think they would be happy? And if as a result of those wars, a lot of immigration is like happening, legal or illegal, then they are basically putting a blame on the wrong vulnerable people.
Right.
It's not their fault that they have to move, and everyone who basically moves, everyone who's a refugee, everyone who's an immigrant, legal or illegal, they are either trying to save their lives, they're either trying to keep their families safe, or they're going for better economic opportunities.
Right.
And if they had all of these opportunities in their home countries, they would never have immigrated.
Right. We're joined online by Barrister Yasser Latif, who is international relations expert. Welcome to the program. Barrister Yasser, how do you see that UK authorities are going to be balancing freedom of speech with the need to stop hate speech at this point in time?
I think one of the problems that UK is facing right now, obviously with respect to the far right protesters, and I mean this entire thing that has happened because of misinformation online. I mean there were far right social media users who actually went ahead and said that this was actually a Muslim assailant who was done in Southport. So I think the issue again in terms of in any freedom of speech or expression, ultimately it comes down to whether or not there were fighting words that were spoken. Now, when a far right protester gets up and gets on the social media and says that so and so is a Muslim, or with respect to this particular incident, there was this woman who had named some Ali Shakati as the assailant in Southport. That obviously creates a situation, and I think what the UK government is doing, especially through Ofcom and other things with respect to sort of prosecuting some of these people who had deliberately, sort of gone ahead and contributed to this misinformation. I think in that sense, the UK government obviously is walking the same tightrope that all governments in the world are. A number of democracies in the West have been affected by social media intrusions by Russia in particular. So I think in terms of that, the UK government is walking the tightrope as it is, has to make sure that freedom of expression and speech is not compromised. Yet, again, we've seen what happened on X. Elon Musk, for example, was partly responsible for what happened in the UK. It was going ahead and, constantly aggravating. So Elon Musk was the X platform as a whole, but Elon Musk especially was going ahead.
And other political leaders' statement as well from belonging to the far right have, of course, played a role in instigating this situation. But Barrister Yasser, when we talk about UK's policies on immigration and asylum seekers, do you think there is a need, or the government is thinking to change some of the policies regarding this?
I think in terms of changing the policy, it's not what happens when a mob gets involved. I think they're oblivious to what the law is or what the immigration policies are. I don't think UK should put a moratorium on immigration. A lot of people want to go to the UK because it has been for so long a haven, and for asylum seekers, for people, UK and other Western democracies have always opened their doors. But again, what you have is a situation where economic grievances of the far right, and these people, sometimes feel that immigrants are taking their jobs. And generally speaking, we see in the West, we see immigrants coming in, they're more hardworking, they're more enterprising generally, and that is the case all across the Western hemisphere, as it were. So I think in that sense, I don't think UK would change its policies. It doesn't need to change its policies, but it needs to control the far right. Now, at this time, what we see in the UK is a hypocritical policy, though I must say the current government has done well to counter the far right by prosecuting them. However, what we need to see is a more stringent measure, because when someone from the immigrant community, especially the Muslim community, gets involved in something untoward, the reaction is very different from when the far right gets involved. Now, even Prime Minister Starmer, who I have great regard for, did say that this whole right-wing thing, the far-right thing, was just merely thuggery and not terrorism, because ultimately it was terrorism, and we're going after immigrant
See
communities.
the responses to these riots in the past few days by the government, and also how are the legal responses to the current unrest is going to be shaping the future of right-wing maybe movements in the future in UK?
I think the right-wing movements generally all across Western democracies are going to increase in intensity. From what I can see, there is a lot of resentment. I was recently there. There's a lot of resentment against immigrants, and which is unfortunate, because these immigrants are, like I said, very enterprising, and they contribute a lot to the society there. But unfortunately, we are seeing this sort of sentiment amongst the white communities, especially the white Caucasian communities which live in these countries, including the UK. They feel that their jobs are being taken, their livelihoods are being impacted by the immigrants who come in and take those jobs. But that's only because the immigrants are more enterprising. So, in terms of this being,
And of course, these are the sentiments of a lot of white people, like you alluded to, and earlier our guests also said the same thing. But in your opinion, what needs to be done by the government at this point in time to address those underlying causes of these far right extremist sentiments, to actually address those issues, to of course counter such movements in future?
well, I think the idea is to have a more socially inclusive economic policy that can help. I think this is why the people have elected the Labour government, because the Conservatives had absolutely failed at doing so. However, I must say that ultimately grievances can come up every now and then on sort of anything essentially. So what needs to be done is to have use the long arm of the law, as it were. What we are seeing, and here I must give credit to the UK government. They've gone in, about 700 people have been arrested, several prosecuted, several charged, and then several convicted as well. So I think, if not convicted, at least jailed with terms. There've been terms as stringent as 2 years or 3 years that have been handed down. But then the other thing that the UK government has done, which is very good, is going after those people. There is this woman who has posted, like I said earlier, Ali Shakati is the name, which is a strange name if you think about it. She had posted that this person was responsible, this fictitious person. Now, they've gone after her, and they've obviously, so things like that, I think, ultimately the reaction has to sort of, correspond to the severity of the crime. I definitely think that the rule of law and order, and I think the UK government has done well in establishing that. But ultimately,
Right, and Barrister Yasser, how do you see these anti-racist and anti-fascist counter-protesters that are responding to these unrest? What do you see the impact of these?
I think there is a greater awareness than, say, for example, in the 1970s, when the famous Paki bashing era was in vogue, and there were racial attacks on South Asian communities. Now there are people in the UK who are more aware. The left, especially, has come up and is resisting. I think, and remember, there's a significant diaspora of Pakistanis, especially, but also from other countries, who are now protesting. So I think a counter protest is always a good idea, and it is indicative of a vibrant democracy. I think, yes, I think the impact is going to be, because here's the thing: the Labour government is dependent on this particular sentiment. The Labour government is left of center, it is progressive, and it is more attuned to the needs of the immigrant communities as such. So I do see these counter protests as being very helpful when it comes to countering far right extremism in the UK.
Right, but at the same time, there has been a surge in Islamophobia in the past few years, and of course, we have been seeing it since the start as well. In your opinion, what kind of policies are needed to counter those sentiments?
I think ultimately the government, and like I said, the Labour government is more tuned to these needs. I think the government has to see that just because in certain cases, and not this particular case in Southport, if Muslims are involved, not to blanket, sort of, tar everyone with the same brush, as it were. I think Islamophobia is a real problem. It's generally speaking, Muslims have been targeted. Muslim mosques have been sort of, the focus of the attack of these far right protesters. I think that is a problem that only sort of like I said, a left of center government, which is attuned to the needs, can do. And I think that is what this current government is doing. I think Keir Starmer especially is very, very aware of the challenges faced by the Muslim community and the general Muslim community as well as other South Asian migrants as well. So I definitely, yes,
Right, right. And let me
Islamophobia.
take the same point to Sheharyar. Sheharyar, how do you see that this recent unrest has influenced UK's discourse on race, immigration, and other such issues?
So, Maryam, I think there needs to be a lot of self-reflection when it comes to the policy makers, the politicians, or the decision makers in the UK. We also have to see how these race riots are perceived in the UK as well, and that's also part of the problem. If you look at the double standards that are basically placed when there is riots, they're basically labeled as thuggery. They're generally labeled as hooliganism. So it separates. But if you look at when certain religious minorities are targeted,
That's
it's
why it
basically
is
noted
said
as
as
terrorism.
two-tier policies, of course.
So that's labeled as terrorism. So it basically goes to show that even the decision makers or the policy makers in the US, in the UK, they basically have a priority system in which if law and order situation arises because of riots, and if they are instigated by a certain
Religious
ethnic or background,
race.
it's treated differently. The priority is placed in a different terms. So this has to be,
Right,
taken up
and
equally.
how do you see the role of UK media in all this unrest, in portraying, or of course, the terms that you have used? These are, of course, disseminated in the public in the way. Do you think the media has played a positive role or negative role in this?
So, Maryam, the semantics matter a lot. These are the semantics that were also used by the new Prime Minister of the UK. He also basically refused to call this domestic terrorism. He basically labeled it as hooliganism. He also labeled it as thuggery. That basically means, or the impression that it gives to people is that this certain law and order situation is not as severe as compared to Islamic terrorism. These are the terms that are used for religious minorities if they are involved in any law and order situation. So this places a huge burden on the people or the policy makers that are working on countering violent extremism, or they're implementing programs or policies that prevent violent extremism. If violent extremism is focused towards a certain religious minority, then it really has no effect if a countrywide policy has to be made. If there are two-tiered policing systems, if there are discriminatory law and order situations prevailing in the same country, then how are policy makers supposed to make policy to prevent this from ever happening again in the future?
Of course. And Barrister Yasser, lastly, what steps are needed to, of course, address these issues and rebuild the trust in diverse communities within UK?
I think one of the things, so just to, come back to sort of something that happened recently. I was watching one of the videos, and there is this one MP, Robert Jenrick. he actually went ahead and suggested that anyone saying Allahu Akbar on the streets of London should be arrested. So you need to have greater awareness in terms of counting. So remember, this was a Conservative MP. So that awareness needs to come both from the British government and the policymakers, as my friend said. The policymakers have to realize that, but I think even Muslims and sort of the immigrant communities now have to come out and say, look, these are some legitimate cultural expressions that we have, saying Allahu Akbar, which is, sort of a central motif of the Islamic faith. It's a central sort of plank of the Islamic sort of expression that needs to be recognized and normalized in society. And I think now Great Britain in the 21st century, with a large Muslim population and large immigrant population, is a very culturally diverse place which has to take into account that diversity. It is no longer, the Anglo-Saxon Britain that it used to be. Once that is recognized, and you see some of that, I mean, the mayor of London is a Muslim, and so on and so forth. You've got so many MPs who are from immigrant communities, especially the Pakistani community. All of these people have to play their part and come forward and resist this tide of far-right extremism. That they have to essentially say, look, for counter MPs like Robert Jenders, and say, look, this is legitimate expression. If somebody saying Allahu Akbar, that doesn't mean he's a terrorist or that he ought to be arrested. All of that has to, come from those who've gotten that, soapbox, as it were. They need to come up and, sort of say that, these are legitimate expressions. These need to be recognized as such. The recognition of the Muslim community as an integral part of the British national, milieu has to be accepted. And I think here the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has to play an important role and say that Britain is welcoming to all of its communities, whoever is living there. Remember, the person who, was responsible for Southport was a Rwandan. Now, there are, fine Rwandan citizens of UK as well. Now they're facing a sort of a blowback. So all of that needs to change, and the leadership has to come from the UK government from the top. And I think even the royal family needs to come up and say.
Right. Thank you very much, Barrister Yasser Latif, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we talk about these, recent riots in Britain, the impact of this disorder will be felt in coming months and years. This is necessary more than ever to, of course, choose peace over conflict. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.